Welcome to our online video series, Reading Hope in Trying Times. Our guest today is our good friend, Dr. Carol Bechtel. Carol has been helping people find their way through the Bible for over 25 years. She's a widely respected author, teacher, and public speaker. Educated at Hope College and Western Theological Seminary in Holland, Michigan, she went on to earn a PhD in Old Testament from Yale University. She began her teaching career at the Presbyterian School of Christian Education in Richmond, Virginia, and has taught at her alma mater, Western Theological Seminary, since 1994. Carol's lectured and preached at churches, seminaries, and universities all over the world, and she's currently on sabbatical in Rome, Italy. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Brian.
It's so good for you to join us from afar.
Thank you. Yeah, I am in Rome, Italy, and that also means I'm in coronavirus lockdown, as you are too, probably in New Jersey.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what it's like there in Italy.
I got here on New Year's Day, and the virus got here just a couple weeks after me, as it turned out, although we didn't know that then. The whole country has been under lockdown since March 9. So while you all in the States are just kind of getting used to this idea of social distancing and not going out very much, I've had a little bit more practice at it, I guess. And the lockdown is a little bit more severe here as well. I can't go out of the apartment, for instance, unless I have a form with me to give to the police if they stop and ask me why I'm out.
Wow.
So I have a little form filled in saying I'm going to the grocery store and I'm going right back.
Wow.
But you can't even go out for a walk anymore. So I'm getting very used to my 2-room efficiency apartment.
I can imagine. Now, you're in Rome, and the worst part of the virus contagion is in the Milan and northern Italy area. Can you talk a little bit about the differences that you've heard about between those two areas?
Yeah. So I'm really grateful that I'm in Rome. I had planned to move to Milan in the middle of March, but that obviously couldn't happen. I am in close contact with a couple of women pastor friends in the north. One is in Milan and the other in Brescia. I talk to them almost daily. And it's really hard to hear the stories that they're telling about Milan. Just to give you some sense of the how that area compares to where I am. On April 2nd, there were, let's see, up in the Milan area, 46,065 diagnosed cases of COVID-19. In the Lazio area where I am, only 3,433. So we're only at about 2% of the total cases in Italy. But of course, they want to make sure to keep a lid on it in places that don't have as many cases. So the lockdown is over the whole country. They said early on, my friend said early on, how difficult it was to be a pastor in this situation. No funerals, for instance. Calling on people in the hospital is impossible. You have to make connections over the phone. And it's just very, very difficult. One of my friends has a parishioner who went into the hospital with a heart attack, got the virus, and now he's very, very ill and his family can't visit him. So it just serves up some excruciating situations. And the Roman Catholic Church, I think, has been just particularly hard hit because of the emphasis on giving last rites. So for instance, in the area of Bergamo, when last I heard, there were at least 8 Roman Catholic priests who had died.
Wow.
So So yeah, um, this was not the sabbatical I expected.
Well, I guess. So what a different experience than what you were anticipating.
Yeah, but it's you know, I'm trying to learn from it and be as present to the experience as I can be. So
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, I mean, are there any, guidance that you can send to all of our American friends based on what you've heard and what you've experienced from over there?
so here's the interesting thing. I've been writing my weekly Bible study blogs, as you know, because you helped me with those. Um, uh, And when I came here, I remember we even had a conversation about how I should do something specific to Italy while I was here. And I just never expected it to be this.
No
Uh,
kidding.
and when I was trying to think of a new series at the beginning of March, it became really obvious to me that I should do a series about uh, the coronavirus here in Italy with an eye for how my experience of it here could perhaps help other people who are not quite as far down the road as we are here in Italy. And it's the strangest thing. I mean, as I've picked out Bible passages to reflect on, um, I, yeah, it makes me look, if not prophetic, then at least prescient, because I'm 2 weeks farther down the road than you are in the United States. But I think what that's meant is that it's given me a chance to experience the panic and the confusion and the grief, but to have a little bit more time to process it so that as I write the Bible study blogs, I can kind of anticipate, I think this is probably what they're going through right now, and then hopefully say some things that help you all to make sense of it a little bit more.
Sure, sure. Well, I'll post a link to your blog to the
Okay,
Writing for Your Life
great,
page where I've got all of these conversations listed, so people
great.
can find that easily. But I think you're right. You've been making a lot of observations there that people can take from.
Well, I just hope they're helpful. I never anticipated being in this position, but I've stayed not because I'm especially courageous. In fact, the opposite is true. I'm actually afraid to get on an airplane right now and fly back to the U.S. I think the
Sure,
curve
sure.
is actually starting to go down here a little bit, and I'm very fortunate to be in a place where they've generously allowed me to stay in my little two-room apartment long after I had planned to. Um, and it's a supportive situation. So I'm not completely isolated, which is worth a great deal. So
Yes, absolutely. No, that's very fortunate on multiple levels there,
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it? So just so that people know, I mean, you're planning to stay there for quite some time yet.
yeah. My plan was to stay here until mid-July, and that plan is currently in place. Even though I get threatening emails from the U.S. Embassy every couple of days saying, leave now or be prepared to stay indefinitely. But I was prepared to stay until July anyway. So I think I'm just going to try to ride it out here. Of course,
Sure.
it's really hard to be away from family and friends in the U.S., especially as I see the wave of infections rising there. All my maternal instincts are saying, fly away home. But then I realized that, I'd still be talking to my children on the phone even if I were at home because,
Sure. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. No, you're safer there. I
So,
mean, for right now.
well, who knows? But this is where I am, and I'll make the best of it. So
Well, at least you have Zoom, right? You've probably been
I
on
have
Zoom
Zoom.
like constantly.
Exactly. Exactly.
So one thing I have to ask you about, we've seen a little bit of snippets of folks in Italy going out on their balconies and singing.
Yeah,
Have you seen that?
it's true. I found myself in the middle of a sort of an impromptu piano concert the other day as I walked to the grocery store. it was one of these little corners where, 3 or 4 buildings are in really close proximity. And I heard piano music played by, I think, a young, kind of hesitant pianist. But all the neighbors were hanging out their windows. And when she finished her rendition of the Italian national anthem, the whole street broke into cheers of brava and applause. And it was really a cool moment.
That would be. Not something you experience every day, is it?
No. And then the other fun thing, I live in fear of getting stopped by the police because I feel guilty even when I don't have anything to feel guilty about. That's just my MO. And I was walking along the street the other day and I heard a policeman shouting at me and I thought, oh, this is it. It turned out he just wanted to tell me that my backpack was open.
Oh, my. Good. False warning.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit and
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how God's helped you in years past when you face challenging
Yeah.
times and kind of what you take from that in these times.
Yeah. So when I first started teaching at Western Seminary, I inherited a class on Job. And I remember thinking, well, I didn't have any special interest in Job, but, I can teach Job. It's just that I'm not sure I'm qualified to teach Job. Because I'm not really sure I've suffered enough. I was, in my early 30s. And, well, I didn't really mean for God to hear that as a prayer. But evidently, God sort of overheard it that way because before I knew it, I had some experiences that qualified me more to teach the book of Job.
Oh, boy.
A divorce, a couple of life-threatening illnesses, and even my house got struck by lightning. So,
Oh, my.
it's not suffering's not a competitive thing. Other people have suffered way more, but it is interesting how God can use such experiences to deepen our faith. And it doesn't always happen that way. I think you can suffer without becoming a deeper person. But remind me, Brian, someday I want to write a book called Never Pray to Become a Deeper Person.
There you go. That
Well,
sounds like a good title.
yeah. Well, it has been kind of my experience, but in teaching Job and writing a little curriculum for Kerygma on Job, I think it's given me a kind of vocation for helping people to think through questions of suffering, particularly, before they end up in the emergency room or the lawyer's office. I think that's part of what Christian education and Christian formation is meant to do, is to give people a chance to think deeply about such things, because when you're in the midst of a crisis, thinking isn't necessarily what you're good at.
Or able to do.
Yeah. So I tell my students, you can either take my course on Job or you can have a life-threatening illness before you graduate.
Well, that's an easy decision, isn't it?
You might learn some of the same things, but I think in my own life and in my study of Job, I think one of the things I've come to realize is that we're allowed to ask why. We're allowed to complain loudly. Read the Psalms too. But we don't always get answers. And I actually think the theme of the book of Job isn't so much about the problems of, the problem of evil or explaining human suffering. I think it's about the limits of human wisdom and how to live faithfully within those limits. How do you live a faithful life even when you don't have all the answers? those are really good things to have thought deeply about um, before you end up in a pandemic, for instance. Um, so I guess I feel like part of my calling is to just shepherd people along uh, in conversations like that.
Well, I can understand why. I mean, you've had the benefit of the years of ups and downs, right? And the learning
Yeah,
that
well,
comes
we
from
all
that.
have, but I think putting those in combination with an invitation to think deeply about the Bible has maybe given me some insights. I really enjoyed an article that was in Time magazine just I think it was the end of March by N.T. Wright, and he was talking about the name of it was Christianity Offers No Answers About Coronavirus, and It's Not Supposed to. Um, but he has a line in there about no doubt the usual silly suspects will tell us why God is doing this to us.
Right, right.
And it reminded me a lot of Job's friends, the usual silly suspects, who with far more confidence than is warranted will try to say, well, this suffering is because God is trying to say thus and so to us. And I think that's above our pay grade. So
Exactly. Exactly. So you've written several books. In addition to folks reading the book of Job, what other suggestions do you have that would be good reading in these trying times?
hmm. So one of the quote more scholarly books that I've written is a commentary on Esther. Um, I say scholarly in quotes because the interpretation series is a very serious series, but I think the whole philosophy of that series is to communicate to pastors, serious lay people, um, but to communicate in such a way that it's as easy to understand as possible without oversimplifying. I mean, there's a scholarly foundation, but the whole point of a good foundation is that you don't say, wow, look at that foundation. I mean, the foundation is there to support the structure on top of it. So it was an interesting exercise to write that commentary, but I think I think the Book of Esther is a book that's more relevant than people assume. Um, it was relevant even before the pandemic, but it's even more so now. One of the reasons I think people don't look to that biblical book um, is that it doesn't really lend itself to sound bites. You really have to immerse yourself in the whole story to be able to get the gold out of it. Um, but when you think about that story, and I wrote it years ago, long before our current political situation, but it's hard to miss the fact that this is a story about what can happen when you put a megalomaniac in charge. Not to mention any names, but yeah. I mean, King Ahasuerus is a buffoon, but you can't really laugh at him too long because he's a really dangerous buffoon. Um, that's what happens when you put power in the hands of a narcissist. So yeah, you could go that way, applying the Book of Esther, but I think it may also have some things to say to the church. Um, even before the pandemic, but particularly after the pandemic. When you look at the character of Esther, for instance, she's quadruply disadvantaged. She's an orphan, she's an exile, she's a woman, she's a Jew, and she and some of the other important characters in the book have to work together, and they have to work from positions of disadvantage and weakness in order to help the story have a happy ending. Now, I think the connections to the church are pretty obvious there, but maybe I should uh, make them, yeah, maybe I should state them a little bit more directly. I think the church is in a position right now where we don't have much power. We're steering from the front of the canoe. Um, and, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how the church comes out of this pandemic in terms of um, its way of thinking of itself and its way of relating to the rest of the world. And I think we've got some stuff we can learn from Esther and some of the other characters in the book, like the eunuchs, for instance. Um, they don't have much power, but they figure out ways to influence the story for good. So, yeah, that's my pitch on Esther. Whether you want to read the commentary or just read the book of Esther, either way, I think maybe you'll get more out of it than you might expect to. I'm biased, of course, but there it is.
Good. No, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of parallels to draw there.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny because I never expected my career to go the way it's gone. I never expected that my particular calling, my particular audience would be what it is. I remember in grad school, one of my professors always used to write in the margins of my paper, too colloquial. Well, I often was too colloquial for the audience he had in mind, but maybe not for the audience that God was calling me to talk to. And I guess I feel like that's the audience that I've been speaking to ever since I, was able to grab my diploma and run across the stage. And it's one of the reasons I take such delight in short devotionals. I don't know too many scholars who waste their time with short devotionals, but I've been doing it for decades. I was in college when somebody first invited me to do a few of those, and I thought, oh, well, this will be easy. It won't take long. Well, guess what? It took a really long time because it's harder to write short than it is to write long. It's a really, really good discipline to distill what you have to say and to not make it harder than it needs to be, to just get in, say what you got to say, and get out, which is pretty good instructions for a sermon too. Somebody quoted Leonardo da Vinci to me the other day, and saying, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication."
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I actually think the devotionals, and now I'm doing those devotionals weekly as a blog, are a really important part of my calling. And yeah, I wouldn't give them up for anything. So.
Well, we hope you don't.
All right, thanks.
Well, Carol, I really want to say thank you for joining us from Italy and sharing all of your experiences, both from there as well as your life overall. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invitation. I really appreciated it.
Well, good luck during the rest of your time there.
Thank you very much, and good luck to you as well.
Good. Well, please stay in touch.
All right, great.
All right.
Bye.
Bye now.